guest who joined us in the part one last time. That's David from Digital Outlook. Good to have you, brother. Thanks for coming on.
Hey guys, I would absolutely. I mean, I'm watching you, Judy's watching you. We're encouraging our community to watch it. You guys bring out some amazing content for sure.
Thank you so much for the kind
Mhm.
words. Yeah, we're
Mhm.
very gracious. So the first thing we wanted to touch on is the dollar, okay, and inflation. People think inflation is going to be under control. They think it is under control. And even the metrics and the methodologies that they use to calculate inflation and release the CPI to the public is actually, first of all, it's manipulated. And second of all, even if it is reported lower, prices are still going up. And that never changes. All people have to do is just pay attention to how much they're paying for items and goods and services. So
Mhm.
how do you see this unfolding right now? Because there is this big
Mhm.
misconception there.
Well, I think the misconception is all part of the plan, right? Because it comes out of the information that you get from these central banks. Now, just recently, we had the ECB come out basically saying, hey, we're going to go on, we are committing to a multiple rate cuts over the next number of months. They said that. Then they flipped it to almost within 24 to 36 hours that, oh, well, we might just have one rate cut. Well, when you're thinking about a rate cut, obviously you must believe that, hey, these guys have inflation under control. But the fact of the matter is, they do not have it under control. Remember, they don't include energy cost, right? And they don't include, food costs in, when they're in the metrics that they use to create the inflation. So the real inflation that you and I are going to feel day to day when we go out and buy different goods and things like that, is just absolutely insane in comparison to what these guys say it is. And another thing too, I would like to bring back on is Versan. You said something last time that I thought was really actually quite great. In that a lot of times people, they go to the grocery store, like you say, and they're paying, a few extra cents, maybe a buck or two for, a jug of milk. And
Mhm.
they're thinking, wow, that milk is must be much more valuable. Well, it's not. It's because the monetary instrument that's utilized to purchase the milk has obviously decreased in value with the dollar. Now what we're at, where we hit like 1.06, and I think today we're at 1.0 or 105 point da 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 da, or very close there too. But when you look at that, it's like literally it's a lower high, and I do expect that we are going to see a drop in the value of that dollar. Well, if there's a drop in the purchasing power of your dollar, what's happening? Obviously
Mhm.
inflation is going sky high. But these individuals, they are looking for every excuse they possibly can get to pump the market full of cash. The $95 billion, thing that they just came out with, that they approved and it passed the Senate now as well, right? For Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan. Let's be honest, guys, they don't give two hoots about that. All they care about is another excuse to literally bring money into the now and to pump it like crazy. And so I just think that this is the reason the misconception is out there is because they're flooding the airwaves with this kind of narrative, and and it's part of the game. It's just part of the game.
Mhm. We're all aware of what's going on with those in power. They've not just weaponized every industry out there, they've weaponized the US dollar alongside the Federal Reserve, the Treasury Department, and they're still
Mhm.
holding the position as world reserve currency. And I think that's the biggest problem. And where this is all going, there's some big things happening behind the monetary system most people are not aware of. For the first time in history, countries all
Mhm.
over the world are rising up together to challenge that dominance of the US dollar. And that's what
Mhm.
I think we're seeing with the BRICS currency, pushing for a gold backed currency. But the conclusion is still the same. There's a new monetary system coming.
Yeah.
And I think what they're trying to do right now is just buy time, shift all the risk onto the everyday average consumer who doesn't know any better, and widen
Mhm.
that wealth gap.
Oh, it's obviously they're going to destroy the middle class. I mean, when you think about the middle class, you're talking about folks that are making anywhere from, let's say, 65,000, because there's the lower middle class bracket, and then 65,000 to, let's say, 200, 250,000, somewhere in this neighborhood. And the thing is, when you're dealing with most of these people, how do they, protect their money? Usually, well, they're throwing it into a house. They're throwing it into, their GICs, their guaranteed investment certificates, their IRAs and all that kind of stuff. And they're basically, depending on the system that they have become accustomed to knowing to do that. Well, you got Biden out there right now talking about a 66% raise in or 44% raise in capital gains. It was Justin Trudeau that came out with the 66%. And isn't it interesting that they're both coming out with this stuff simultaneously? And it is talking about, and they are really, when you talk about destroy, they want to destroy our ability to make wealth,
Hmm.
right? When you're talking about an increase like that in your capital gains, you're talking about destroying that. Now, petrodollar. Petrodollar is what's really has given the US dollar its world reserve currency status. And we know that that was under the Nixon era when Henry Kissinger went over to Saudi Arabia and made a deal with the House of Saud that, hey, if you're going to sell the oil, you'll sell it in US denominated funds. Well, we know that that is absolutely dead because of what you just mentioned there, Versan, how these nations have risen up together. How many more inductees have been brought in to the BRICS countries, right? And Saudi Arabia being one, Argentina, another big oil producer, being another one. And you had China recently, within the last 6 months, go out there and purchase 1 million barrels of oil. What did they use to pay for it? Their digital yuan. Bang. You are watching it happen in real time, but the most people are absolutely oblivious. Most people don't have a clue of what's going on. What they want to know is that when they go to the bank and they take that money or they use their debit card and they go down to wherever that they can, buy what they want and this and that. Because remember, it's all about consumption, consumption, consumption. It's not about asset building. It's utilizing this monetary instrument just to consume. And that's why we see the advertise. We're just obliterated with it all the time because they don't want you to get wealthy. They just want you to be content.
Hmm. Agreed.
That's the goal. So
Yeah,
I agree
and
with you 100%.
yeah, and for the proposed 44% capital gains tax, so that's actually going to make a lot of high net worth individuals want to leave the country,
Mm-hmm.
leave the
Well,
US, you know.
businesses, yeah, the companies,
Point.
yep, they're going to want to be out of there.
Yeah.
Yep.
The thing is, they can still, I mean, the basically that's how they legally still steal wealth, but
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the voters for that administration, they're not even in that bracket. You know what I'm
Well,
saying?
and that's the thing. They come out with these narratives. Oh, we're going to tax the rich, those mean rich guys. Well, if anyone knows anything about real economics, it is the wealthy that have been able to go out there and provide the opportunity for the average folks to get out there and have jobs, and not just jobs, but high paying jobs that will produce, a lifestyle for families and this and that. So they come out with this narrative that the rich wealth is bad. Wealth is bad. They'll say wealth is bad. Meanwhile, they themselves have become nothing but wealthy in the positions that they've held for the last 10, 20, 30 years in Congress, right? But the narrative is nope, we got to really tax these. Well, what they really are doing there, they're going to destroy the economy that most of the middle class rely upon for their jobs, for their, basically the how they live, the houses and that and all that kind of stuff. And they wipe it out. They wipe it out. Just think about it, the cascading effect. So let's say a major like Procter Gamble, major employer in the United States, it decides, hey man, with all this going on here, for our stakeholders, for our, we're gonna get up and we're gonna move shop, move. Well, where do those jobs go?
Oh.
They're gone. Those jobs are gone. Well, what's the cascading effect of that? Do you think the car dealers in the local neighborhoods are selling as many cars? Do you think that those folks that are having can't pay their mortgages are now being foreclosed on? And the cascading effect is what people miss. When you overtax and you take away an incentive in a free market economy, you're literally driving that economy to reliance on the state, which is really what they want.
What Elizabeth Warren was, she made a statement a couple times actually saying, okay, we need to tax the wealthy, tax
Mm,
the rich more.
mm,
In my opinion, that's she's trying to divert people's attention to focus on that. And that's really stupid from a logical
mhm.
standpoint, because if you
Yeah.
really cared about the public and want to make the quality and standard of living better for your average family, You don't go after the rich. You focus on making their quality and standard of life more affordable.
You
Mhm.
raise it up, and that's
Yeah,
providing
that's
greater
what they should
opportunity.
do. But they're trying to divert
So,
your attention and
mhm.
let's demonize these high net worth individuals. So
Yeah.
stupid. I don't see the logic behind it, but it's all planned.
Mhm.
She knows what she's saying. She knows what she's doing.
And there's
Um,
Elizabeth Warren herself that started off maybe worth 1.2 million when she enters Congress. Now is worth what? Deca millions, if not hundreds of millions. Come on,
it's,
what other career path can you see those kind of growth?
well,
Yeah.
that's insider trading. They
Oh,
get
yeah.
firsthand
Yep.
information. So
And they've made it so it's not illegal for them.
Yeah.
yeah, of course they've rigged the laws to work in their favor. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's in,
Yeah.
Like what happened with the package that just got passed the other day.
The
Yeah,
treasury.
well,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
that too. But if
Yep.
the
Okay.
fact that we gave money,
Oh, the
taxpayer
nut.
dollars
Yes.
to Ukraine and Israel,
Yeah.
if they are insolvent, who's paying for it? It's all tax
Mhm.
dollars. Some of these people, Zionists, let's just say, at the top heads of our government, who are not allowing this funding to stop, but they're stealing from the taxpayers and funding it. So there's going to be a point where, like Lynette Zhang, we said, we vote with our wallets, we vote with our money.
Mhm.
There's going to have to be a point where us, the people, as a community, are going to have to stand up for this. I'm done paying my taxes if this is where it's going.
I mean, they just went out and absolutely have said that they are. Look, the Treasury said they're doing a big bond buyback program. Now, I know you guys are aware of this. Well, where is the money coming for the Treasury to make this massive buyback program on bonds, which, by the way, they have only done? It's been 20 years since they've done it. Yes, that's true. 20 years since the last time. But do you realize they've only ever done a bond buyback program like this twice in the last 100 years? And it's the Federal Reserve that is actually going to be buying the debt market. Now, you got to know the debt market. The debt market is the beginning and the end of all of these markets. Don't
Yep.
kid yourself. And few people truly understand how the bond market genuinely works. But basically, what's happening is you are watching them literally buy up the market. Now, why are they doing that? Because once they start buying up the debt, where does the money go? Well, it's going to go to risk on assets. They are going to pump this market till it
Yes.
absolutely explodes. But the intention is destruction. The intention is to bring us to a system that they have already got the infrastructure outlined for to move us into that. And just to add on what you were saying there, Versan, about, and Lynette Zhang is big on this as well. The only way out of that system is to be your own central bank. How do you do that? You do what they do. You put your funds into assets that are going to insulate you from the oncoming onslaught. That's what.
yeah, definitely. And they never let a good crisis go to waste. So they know it's coming and they already have
Yeah,
plans on how to respond to it.
yeah, that's right.
Now, speaking of the 44% capital gains tax that Biden proposed,
Yeah.
both of you guys, I'm asking both of you, do you think that's going to get passed? Do you think that's going to work out? Or what do you think?
I think it will get passed. Look how much has already been accomplished by these criminals. It's the big banks, you got the military industrial complex, and then you have the drug dealers, big pharma. They've gone away with so much already. Why wouldn't they push it further?
Do you want to see the way that things really work behind the scenes? Just look at the industry that deals with lobbying. It is obscene.
Yeah. Yeah.
Legal
No, no,
form
no.
of
Yeah,
corruption and
yeah.
buying influence. Um, Now, what I wanted to say about politics is a lot of individuals go into politics with good intentions, but they eventually discover how little influence they actually have and how much
Mhm.
changes they can really make. It's just a matter of going up the ladder. Um,
Yeah.
It's
yeah,
theater. It's theater. And yes, a lot will get into these positions and then they're corralled fairly quick. And
or
they
they're
find
pushed
out
out.
that or they're pushed out, or all of the well-meaning intention that they had, they realize how quickly they can be literally sidelined
Yeah.
and how quickly, look, you, when you think about this, you could have your years of popularity and then your years of opposition, and it can change just like that. And don't think that these guys, they know it. They've known it for years. You're looking at some of these individuals that have been sitting in office since I was in kindergarten.
Mhm.
I kid you not, I'm 56 years old. Some of these people have been in office for 40 and almost 50 years.
Right.
They have no
And
incentive to retire or
none.
resign.
I mean, you're watching these people in their late 80s still running for re-election. Why? Because they have already toed the line so much they know they're never going to change. And look, if we really do believe, now I know a lot of people are going to find this hard to accept. I get it. But it is not our government that is genuinely running these countries. I do not believe that for
Oh,
a
of course
second.
not.
There
Yeah.
is and whether you want to call it a shadow government, whether you want to call it whatever, it's you guys would know this. The saying, "He who holds the gold makes the rules." That's the real golden rule, right?
Yeah.
Well, look, it's the central banks, and
Yeah.
who's behind the central banks that are really running the show. That is a fact, Jack.
Hmm. Yeah.
And you're right. It
100%.
doesn't matter. Like, why it doesn't matter who gets in office. Look, a lot of people say, well, Trump's going to get in office. And maybe this will bring us to our next subject, but how he's going to say, oh, wow, we're not going to have CBDCs, hogwash. He's going to get in there. If he does get in there, which I doubt, but if he did get in there, what I think is going to happen is this. He's going to come and say, well, we're having to put out a CBDC, but the one we're going to put out, oh, wow, that was way better than the one these guys had planned. It's just a bunch of dogum.
Yeah.
It is really theater.
We're supposed to have three branches of government.
Right.
Unfortunately, we have four, and one of them is unelected and extremely well funded. That's
I
your
know it
shadow
is.
government.
Yeah.
And the
Yes.
sooner people begin to understand and accept this,
Mhm.
maybe the faster and the sooner we can get to a better place.
No, that's a
Well,
good point and well said.
Thank
yeah,
you.
definitely. Let's move on to crypto, you guys. So, okay, we're all invested in cryptocurrency, digital assets. We know it's going to be a part of the future, and we're getting in early, because we know certain assets are going to appreciate in value, especially as they issue more debt, print more money, devalue the currency even more.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
But it's a fact, that many cryptocurrencies, most of them, will probably vanish and just go to zero at some point when regulations come in and they start exposing the bad actors, putting that structure into place. What do you guys think about that?
Well, I think it's also going to be winners and losers. It's kind of like, when the automobile was coming out in the turn of the century. There were a lot of automakers, like a lot, a lot.
Mhm.
And some of them even lasted up until into the 60s there. Like I think was it Studebaker or whatever was around for a good while. And but
Yeah.
eventually that marketplace just consolidated. And once you had a few of these become behemoths and really controlled it, well, then they bought up all the steel. They just basically cornered the market, and they were allowed to corner the market. We saw that with the internet boom, right? And a lot of the companies have really consolidated their positions so that, look, it would take an act of God to get them out of there, right? Like you look at Alphabet, I mean, and all the competitive, but now like there's so many that aren't even available. I remember like one big one, Alta Vista, and even when Google was coming up, look at the market share that they took away from Yahoo. Big, big, big. So I think you're right. I think that we will probably see there's about 27,000 different ecosystems. A lot of them are built off of Ethereum. I think what you're going to see is you're going to see a consolidation of that because it's going to be utility based. Now, the market is going to drive some of that. Regulation and legislation is going to drive another big percentage of that. But I think it'll all get narrowed down to maybe there'll be only 30 to 50 of these things that are really out there producing any kind of genuine utility. And so, yeah, for sure, I think that's going to happen. And I think too, like with stable coins, when you think of a stable coin, the reason why, like we are definitely moving into this digital system, and Ripple certainly, look, the number one central bank digital currency infrastructure provider for the majority of nation states that are out there is Ripple. That's a fact, Jack. And you can go and fact check that and research that and go all the way back. Yes, that is true. Digital Pound Foundation, Digital Dollar Project, working with the Bank of International Settlements to solve the interoperability issue between CBDCs and all of that. Because a CBDC, remember, it's a closed system. It's a closed distributed ledger technology system. And there is going to have to be bridge assets. Well, we know that XRP is absolutely the bridge asset for that. Now, one of the things that I see a lot of FUD that is coming out right now is, oh, well, in the United States, due to this lawsuit, it was disclosed that Ripple is utilizing USDT right now for their institutional on-demand liquidity partners in the United States. So there's folks that have said, oh, yeah, well, see, they're going to ditch XRP. They're ditching XRP. Not on your life. What they did is once they got that decision out of Judge Annalisa Torres, where we got the secondary market sales of XRP do not represent securities, but the institutional sales may very well. Well, Ripple, in response to that and wanting to maintain a compliant type of response, they went out and said immediately they went to their ODL partners in the United States, says, listen, in the interim, we're going to utilize USDT. And that is exactly what they did. They did not substitute USDT for XRP because remember this too. Majority of Ripple's ODL partners are outside of the United States. 90 to 95% of them, guess what? They're all still using XRP.
Yep.
I do believe 100% we're going to get the clarity with respect to this institutional sales situation once this whole thing is all put to bed, even if it does have to go to a Supreme Court decision. We're going to win it. And at that point, you better believe they are going to use the native asset, right? The native asset. I liken it to this. So in the Second World War, interestingly enough, when the Germans were trying to invade Russia, one of the things that held them back the most were the rails, the train rails. Why? Because the Russian rail system worked on a different standard than the German system. So when they got there, they had to literally change the wheels on all the cars to fit onto the Russian rail system to send, logistically all the supplies. Well, that slowed them down tremendously and allowed Russia in a big way to capitalize on that, to, be able to protect themselves, defend, and repel the invasion. Well, the thing is this, in our current system, we've got all of these systems that are operating on different rails. What they're doing right now on an infrastructure level globally, and all of these central banks are they're all in on it. They are developing a rail system that will be interoperable with every single central bank digital currency that exists so that it is so fluid that you're not even going to know it. It's going to be practically seamless. And we're in the process of doing that. And this represents to me just unparalleled opportunity for those that are willing to see it, because we're entering into this space right when the infrastructure is being laid and developed. Now, you just imagine what that's going to look like when it's all in full play. Now, I just recently did a video, and not to plug my own video in this or whatever. The point I want to bring out here is the global money supply, which I know you guys know very, very well. And when you think of, just the equities market alone, we're talking 92, $93 trillion of value. And then, of course, the debt market, $300 trillion of debt in the global debt market. Then, of course, if you wanted to get into the big money with the derivative market and all of that is going to be tokenized.
Mhm.
And when you think about that, there are not very many ecosystems that could handle that kind of volume. XRP is one.
That's the
And
scalable aspect of it.
yes, it's ahead of the game in ways that we have, most people don't even really realize it. It was not created, like they say, for retail. It was not. And we are, I think,
I
we're
agree.
sitting, we are just so blessed to have this opportunity, and it cannot be cheap. That's another thing I like to bring up. But stablecoin legislation is the beginning of the regulatory clarity that we're going to see in this space. And by the way, interestingly enough, you had the BIS come out there and really come out, and here's a non-elected, organization that is talking to central banks around the world, encouraging them to go out there and make sure that they have the stablecoin legislation. You got the European Union doing it, right? And of course, you got all the Commonwealth countries at it. And, you got the Federal Reserve, they're pushing it as well. We're going to get it. And it's
Yeah.
going to be big. It's going to be big.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree. 100%. I think all the indicators, all the signals are right there. It's just playing out. And I mean, the whole system, I know we say this a lot, but we'll reiterate it again. The monetary system is falling apart. So what we're seeing right now is the cracks in the foundation, but the dam hasn't really been toppled over yet. But that's coming.
Well, we're so risk averse. And I think this is also something that has been fed down the line, right from grade school onward. The whole message has been, hey, go to school, get a great education, get out, get a great job, get married, work your 25, 30 years, retire, and, you'll have 2 weeks of vacation, a little bit of money or whatever. They do not encourage risk. They do not encourage entrepreneurial endeavor
True.
and
Yeah.
that type of stuff. They don't do it. In fact, they want to take your creativity and innovation and they want to incorporate it. Go work for some of these big companies who and you think about this intellectual property rights. When you go to work for Apple, you go to work for Microsoft, you work for Intel, you work for any of these big companies. If you come up with a solution to a major problem that could be worth billions, do you know what? While you work for them, if you come up with that, they own that intellectual property. It's right in your employment
Oh,
contract.
yes. True.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they're not out there. And so people are so risk averse. Is there opportunity? Yes. Is there risk associated? Yes, there is.
Hmm.
But that's what adventure is. That's what the explorers are. They risk their lives when you think about it. To discover the new world. They didn't know what they were getting into, but they had a spirit of adventure associated and they were willing to do it. Well, you've got a system that is literally trying to depress that in the human population.
I think very few people really understand how this technology is being integrated into the system. The XRP, for instance, the digital asset itself was designed for infinite scalability. And that means that later on down the road, there will be no limitation on how high the price can be. And that's because as it becomes universally adopted, accepted, and extensively used through all the banks and all the institutions, eventually over time, since it's riding on those rails, it will eventually absorb all the money in circulation. And that, therefore, by absorbing that money, it improves its liquidity and that drives the price up even higher.
Can I
Yes,
add
it's
something?
the internet of value. Internet of value, please. Yes, go ahead, Vandell.
Yeah, I just want to say that a lot of times the price on assets is supposed to be driven by supply and demand. Now, here's the thing. As my brother said, and as you said earlier, once utility starts kicking in and they really start using it, and institutions start acquiring it to use it, what's going to happen with the supply is it's going to shrink.
Diminish
Because
significantly.
the
Yeah.
demand will come from institutions. And here's the thing.
Yeah.
When they buy it, they're not going to be selling it. They're going to
Nope.
be
They're going to
holding
be
it.
utilizing it. Yeah.
They're going to
And
be
right
holding
now,
it and using it.
yeah.
Yeah, which will drive up the price eventually.
Yeah.
It's just a
Yeah.
matter of
Yeah.
time and it would just continue.
Well, when you
That's
think
supply and
about it,
demand. Mhm.
even now, let's be honest. I just saw an article that where, in this last dip that we saw, whale wallets picked up over in a period of 24 hours, they picked up something like 31 million units, and in a period of 48 hours, 600 million. I mean, if you don't think, I mean, if when you look at these markets, do you really believe, do any of us truly believe that it's retail that's pushing the billions upon billions of dollars of traded volume daily? No. Most of us already know that there are institutions behind the scenes, but that is a drop. This is their play money right now, a drop in the bucket when it comes to genuine global wealth and money supply. Because this space is what? 2.4, 2.5 trillion. And Brad
Yeah.
Garlinghouse literally said, hey, I expect, and I probably underestimated, he said, that this entire crypto market by the end of 2024 will be at 5 point some, 5.2, 5 point whatever. And he said, I probably even underestimated what I think it will be by the end
Yeah.
of this year. Well, we're almost halfway through the year, right? And so you're looking at that and you're starting to see utilization and adoption at a rapid pace. It's not going to be like how the internet took 25, 30 years to really kind of hit its peak. It's going to happen so much faster.
Definitely faster for sure. You're
And
right.
I do think at that point, when all of the framework is done, when all of the regulatory clarity is there, when they have it sewn together in the way in which they want to wear this garment, like we're not just talking about legislation for legislation's sake. We're talking about crafted legislation that keeps them in the position of the driver's seat. Let's be honest here, right? When they
Point.
get it all done, and it's all sewn up the way they want it to go, it's going to go absolutely bananas. And that's why I say on my channel, oftentimes it is going to represent the greatest wealth transfer in the history of mankind. I really genuinely do believe that.
Yeah.
Indeed. I agree with you. Now, before we do wrap it up, I was thinking we could bring this up. So the banking
Mhm.
crisis.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Um, it started with a few banks going down.
Silicon Valley, yeah.
Things cooled down for a while. People think we're in the
Mhm.
clear, but there are a few indicators that Versan and I personally use.
Okay.
The 2-year yield curve and the 10-year yield and some other indicators.
On the
And
treasury bonds, right?
yes, that's
Okay,
correct. Yeah.
yeah. The debt market, yeah.
A few others.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing right now is, and historically, even though there were recessions or, excuse me, bankruptcies within the economy in
Mhm.
financial institutions, historically, the way they come in waves.
Yeah.
So it happens, things cool down for a bit. People think everything's in the clear and then it continues again. Well, right now, that's exactly what's happening. We're in the clear for a little bit, but we're not fully in the clear. We think other waves are going to
Mhm.
come this year.
Mhm.
And the thing is this about the banking situation right now, the FDIC has about $200 billion in reserves, but they
No, they
insure,
don't. I don't think they do.
well, it's probably a little less than that
I
right
think
now.
I think they
That
report that, but they certainly
it's
don't
probably
have enough
less.
helicopter cash to rescue all the funds on deposit. That's for sure. And in
Yeah.
fact, the legislation is written now that if there is another major banking crisis, the depositors themselves and the utilizers are going to be on the hook for that. They're going to
Yeah,
be on
it's
the
a
hook for that.
bail-in.
A
Yeah,
bail
and
in.
yeah,
Yep.
and
And I
there's
think you're going
18.
to see one of the bigger banks. This is what I project. I think we're going to see one of the major banks in the United States, I mean a big one, is going to be in such a crisis situation that you're going to literally see a consolidation within the banking industry. I actually believe it 100%.
Oh,
I absolutely believe it
absolutely.
100%.
Absolutely. I'm with you on that 100%. And we're in the US has up to about $18 trillion in US deposits. So if we were saying the FDIC has about less than 200 billion,
Oh, yeah.
they can't even cover 1 trillion if
No,
several of these banks
no,
go out like a
no.
dominoes at the
Uh huh.
same time.
Yep.
So, anyway, that's where the
Mhm.
bail-in comes in. But I wanted your take on that, you and Verson's, about the banking situation right now.
Mhm.
Like,
I
how are
think
you
I,
guys
I
looking
gave
at
I
it?
gave my 2 cents there. I actually do believe that. In fact, we will see a major bank in the United States. I have my I look. I'm not going to say which one I think it's going to be, but I have an idea of which one I think it's going to be, and I think it's going to happen. Probably before the end of this year, we're going to see a major, major, major deal go down. And I think it's going to literally send shockwaves through the system, and they are going to come in and they're going to do what they've always done, right?
Oh my God, this goes back to 2008. It's just there's
Yep.
systemic
Uh-huh.
failure in the banking system. The banks are
Hmm.
insolvent. They give bad loans to each other. Honestly, they can all collapse. They really could. But again,
Yep.
what they're doing is projecting financial stability and the illusion that everything's okay. So that
Yep.
way they can continue to buy time, but
Well,
also
and that's the whole repo
consolidate.
market, isn't it?
But
Yeah.
that's what they're
Hmm.
doing. They're trying to consolidate the banking system. My final sense in all of this is just that I think people are so mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically drained, right? With all this crap going on in the world. And there's that deepening polarization and even the awareness at the same time of the systemic corruption while all this is happening, even with Trump and the situation with the Epstein scandal. We don't have to get into that maybe another time. Kind of also points on now every time like the information, more information gets like the spotlight is on Epstein again. some crisis happens like the next day. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, it's
No,
planned
surprise,
out. Come on.
surprise,
I
of
mean,
course.
Like, hey,
You don't need-
don't think about this. Look, this bridge just came down.
Yeah, exactly.
that's the whole purpose of the mainstream news channels.
And that's what all these and
Yeah.
and I think this is what a lot like when we think of all the protests in the world of what's going on, and people are just getting, but I think a lot of spotlight is being thrown on that as a massive psyop distraction in a big way too.
100%. Yep.
I agree.
Well,
I agree.
you guys, this was an
Mhm.
excellent conversation. We're going to need to do a part 3. So I'm actually looking forward to
Yeah.
that.
No, you
Any
guys are
last words,
fantastic.
David Verson? Go ahead,
Well,
David.
I'll just, guys, one thing I do want to say is as much as we try to come out there with our perspective and our thoughts and our ideas and, our, just the way in which we interpret what we're seeing. Now, look, our fingers are on the pulse practically every day, all day. That's what we all do. And, as people in this space, and I'm talking about, you guys, Black Swan Capitalist, Digital Outlook, the other channels and things like that. And that, the thing that I always want to encourage folks to do is, for the goodness sake, you owe it to yourself to get out there and become educated. Now, YouTube is great. It's great for Confluence. It's great for this and that. But start to dig these things up. Remember the disciplines you learned when you were in school and you were doing that. Start peeling back some of these onions. Do not just sit there and acquiesce and willingly accept the narratives that are being, spoon-fed to us by the Fifth Estate. Use your own critical thinking. That is one thing I think that they have really done in this situation, is they have tried to seriously dumb down people's critical thinking, overwhelming them with all kinds of events, to the point where, they just become exhausted by it.
Yeah.
And, they're just like, I'd rather not, I'm not even going to tune in. But by tuning out, they're really hurting themselves. And so that would be my biggest encouragement is get out there, really, really research it. There's some amazing information that you can find for yourself.
Their motto is divide and conquer. And that's what they've been doing all this time. The fact that we can break free from that, that's really where our real strength lies, our strengths, excuse me.
Yep. Absolutely agree
So
with that.
we have to be mindful of that. And I know this sounds like cliche, but love is the answer. So we need to be more empathetic towards each other and compassionate, despite our different views and all the polarity that they're pushing down us. So
right.
that's
It's not I really want to reinforce that we are not our own enemies. We have these, individuals that are pushing that kind of narrative. We have these corporate groups that want to push that narrative. But if you got face to face, elbow to elbow with a lot of the individuals that are kind of facing these things, they all hurt the same. Yeah. They all suffer the same. They all are going through the same. My wife, Judy, and I'll throw this out the last little bit. She lived in Belarus and Ukraine for over 12 years when, it was really, really rough to live there. And you know what the average folks want? They want exactly what you and I want. They want a life that they can live, that's filled with peace, have some family, have harmony, have all these things. It is this narrative that's fomenting this hostility around the wide world. And yeah, I don't get it. I just don't understand it, but you're absolutely 100% right. We're supposed to be that for one another.
Indeed. We're all striving for the same thing at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Well, perfect. Great conversation, you guys. We will definitely do a part 3. Always good seeing you, brother.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining, David.
Yeah,
Rasan,
you guys
I'll
too.
speak to you soon.
call me later, man.